Thank you all for coming. I want to especially thank our presenters at this roundtable, Ben, Mike, Nick, John, and Patrick. We're very sorry that John Howard from University College Dublin was not able to attend. We're particularly sorry because he has just contracted a case of COVID and is sick with that. So that is
our reality these days.
Yes, it is unfortunate. So this is the second in our series of roundtables in which we are trying to bring together people who use From the Page in a particular way that have something in common to talk about the experience of transcription, of crowdsourcing, how they run their projects, both the technical and non-technical side of things. Today's roundtable focuses on technical integration. So we have a number of very talented software developers, library integrators, systems librarians here to talk about the ways that they are integrating crowdsourced contributions with library systems and integrating library systems with crowdsourcing platforms. We hope that this is going to be of general interest to anyone who is interested in APIs and library and publishing system integration. Again, we want this to be a pretty open conversation. So each of our presenters is going to explain a little bit about what they're doing in their own institution. And then we'll have time for general discussion at the end of the hour.
Bethany, take us away.
My name is Bethany Radcliffe, and I work for Ben and Sarah, and I'm also a PhD student in information studies at the University of Michigan. I will be kind of introducing our speakers and transitioning between speakers as we move along this hour. So just to kick it off, our first speaker is Ben University. His title is that he's a research software and data engineer. As a quick bio, Ben is a member of the Center for Digital Scholarship at Leiden Universities, where Ben supports researchers with tools and expertise on processing digital data in their research. From the Page, Ben's From the Page project is currently mostly used as a separate system in educational context, and where possible, they use From the Page to import documents through IIIF Manifest. In the future, they hope to allow experts or the general public to use From the Page to add or correct transcriptions for their digital collections. So I will hand it over to Ben.
Thank you, Bethany. Since it was only 5 minutes of time that we have to present, that was the most of my story already. But I'll share my screen and show you a little bit about a little bit of what we have available. Okay, let me first show our transcription platform, our From the Page instance. We started using it in 2017 or so, and it's still officially in a pilot phase. We wanted something to annotate our digital collections, even before our digital collections were really IIIF accessible. So we started with some trials, and from there word got out that we have it available, and it's now, as Bethany said, mostly used in education. So teachers set up courses around using From the Page for transcription, and where possible we import existing works through IIIF into From the Page, which was actually a reason to choose From the Page to begin with. And now, since 2020, our digital collections have been made more accessible through IIIF, and that really begs the integration. Going to from our digital collections to FromThePage and back. Unfortunately, it's still a dream of mine. Although I'm also currently working with a emeritus professor. I'm not sure if that's the English term as well, a retired professor who works on some English letters that are in our collections. They were imported from our digital collections. Apologies for the switching. But as you can see, these letters, have a handwriting that is not easily readable. OCR, the OCR built into the Islandora repository system does not recognize any of this. We're working on presenting the transcriptions that this professor is making back into our Islandora repository. We haven't got anything yet, but I hope to, this is just a mock-up, I hope to make this link work so that people, either the general public or experts, can help us transcribe works that are unreadable. And that is really my story. It's for now, it's still a dream.
Thank you for sharing. Were you going to say something, Sarah?
I wish, Ben, that John Howard was able to be here, because he's done some of this launching from a digital library system into FromThePage. And maybe we'll have to go find his GitHub repo and add that to the notes, even if he's not available to show us what he did. And we have a presentation that he and I did like a couple of years ago on how that worked for University College Dublin.
Yeah, that's great. I do have some ideas. I know about the APIs that would help us get to the right place in FromThePage. But yeah, we're still not there in terms of doing it.
Well, our next speaker is Nick Versteegh from Ohio University Libraries, and Nick is a metadata technologies librarian at Ohio University Libraries, where he catalogs books and collaborates on archival digitization projects. And as a quick little intro to their project, in the fall of 2020 and winter of 2021, Ohio University Libraries produced a package of to export from the page field-based transcription projects into Companjen. And the scripts used FromThePage's API to validate field schemas and download transcripts. And they use Companjen's API and capture service to upload the reconciled field metadata. And so with that, I will let Nick share a little bit more.
Hello. I'm Nick Versteegh, a metadata technologies librarian at Ohio University Libraries. The metadata part means that I do bibliographic cataloging as well as Dublin Core for digital archives. Technologies means that I use IT tools like Python, and librarian means that I'm in a library technical services department. My 5 minutes is about integrating FromThePage with Companjen using their respective APIs. So Ohio University Libraries Digital Initiatives Department digitizes our unique archival materials and posts them to the web via OCLC's Companjen digital collection management system. During the pandemic, we've been using FromThePage to both transcribe documents as well as gather field-based metadata on digitized collections, including TIFFs of dance posters and PDFs of D-Day veterans reminiscences. Back in the fall of 2020 and winter of 2021, Erin, a colleague from Digital Initiatives, asked if I might be able to help fix some integration problems she was having exporting FromThePage data into Companjen. FromThePage has a built-in ConnectDM integration that uses ConnectDM's IIIF manifest data to automatically export completed transcripts back into ConnectDM's full-text transcription fields. This integration covers FromThePage's main traditional transcription role, but one of our collections consisted of PDFs that had been manually sideloaded into FromThePage because ConnectDM didn't support IIIF for PDFs at the time. So the built-in integration couldn't automatically pair back these transcripts with their ConnectDM objects. And two collections were using field-based transcription to gather metadata that corresponded to specific ConnectDM fields, but the FromThePage export would instead dump all the fields into the single transcript field as if they were unstructured text. Fortunately, FromThePage provides an API for transcript data, and ConnectDM has its own metadata API as well as a SOAP XML web service called Catcher that will accept edits from specific metadata fields, making it possible for us to roll our own automatic remediation of sideloaded PDFs and field-based transcriptions via scripts. So in October 2020, I started a Python package named ConnectDM util scripts to support our two unsupported use cases. Jeremy Stroud at the Washington State Library had already written a Python script that would take a JSON file of ConnectDM field edits and implement them via the SOAP XML catcher service. So ConnectDM util scripts could target JSON text files instead of having to do SOAP. To solve the sideloaded PDFs problem, I wrote a script called FTP to Catcher that pairs transcripts back to their corresponding ConnectDM objects. Luckily, the file names of manually uploaded PDFs were stored in FromThePage in a manifest metadata field called DC source, and they happen to exactly correspond to a field in our ConnectDM metadata. So this script could take the FromThePage project and ConnectDM collection coordinates, do a search for the field name in ConnectDM, and then output a JSON catcher edit containing the FromThePage transcript. To solve the field-based transcription export problem, I wrote a script called FromThePage fields to Catcher that to match field-based transcriptions back to their corresponding ConnectDM fields. It takes a set of FromThePage project coordinates and a CSV file of FromThePage project field names mapped into ConnectDM field aliases and outputs a JSON catcher edit. Because these two scripts require FromThePage project field names and a ConnectDM-based field aliases as input, I included two scripts that print the FromThePage and ConnectDM project and collection metadata to the terminal, print CDM info and print FTP info. Remediating field-based transcriptions turned out to have some tricky complications due to the way field-based transcriptions were handled in FromThePage, as well as a ConnectDM catcher bug. FromThePage's API renders field-based transcriptions as HTML or TEI XML documents, so that use the field schema that was current when the entry for the object was made. So fields must be scraped out of the markup, and if the field schema changed while the transcription project was in progress, there can be multiple schemas in a project. So I wrote a script called scan FTP fields to report on what schemas exist in a FromThePage project so that old schemas can be manually updated. ConnectDM has controlled vocabularies applied to select metadata fields that FromThePage doesn't cross-reference. So I wrote a script called scan FTP vocabs, which outputs a report on what terms found in FromThePage fields-based transcriptions projects are, but terms that are in the FromThePage project but aren't in the ConnectDM collection, so that they can be added to the ConnectDM collection or corrected. ConnectDM's catcher service has a bug related to controlled vocabularies that makes it silently fail to implement edits. So I wrote a script called catcherdiff, which takes a catcher JSON edit and produces a report on what edits would have been made if those edits were effectively applied. So we can check to see if failures have occurred. Since the original development of ConnectDM util scripts last year, ConnectDM added IIIF support for PDFs, and FromThePage has developed a metadata creation feature, which may alleviate some of the integration problems the scripts were intended to solve. I hope that ConnectDM util scripts will become obsolete as soon as possible. Thanks.
That was really great. All of this coming circle in your systems. I'm excited to see if in our Q&A if anyone else has had any experience trying these things or something similar. So Our next presenter is Mike Lisenbaum. And are you on the call, Mike? Okay, I see you. Awesome.
Yes, I'm here.
Great. And Mike is a software engineer and full stack web developer with expertise building object-oriented MVC-based web applications. And today he's going to give an overview of the infrastructure from the page at the U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum and discuss the tool that was built for exporting from the project online collections catalog for search and display via Solar and IIIF. And I will turn it over to Mike.
Thanks, Bethany. Hi, yeah, I'm Michael Leezenbaum, a software developer at the U.S. Holocaust Museum. So yeah, I'm gonna show you guys today how we get material into from the page from our system for transcription and translation, and then how we get those transcriptions and translations out of from the page and incorporate them back into our catalog for search and display. So let me share my screen real quick. Bear with me 1 second. I'm sorry guys, I'm gonna request that we go on to the next person and come back to me because I had to accept, I think this is because I just upgraded my Mac. I have to give it permissions to share the screen. So I'm gonna have to quit Zoom and come back. If we could go to me next, that would be much appreciated.
Yeah, that's totally fine. So it looks like our next presenter will be John Fackrell, who is a web developer. John, are you ready to present?
Yeah, I can go ahead.
Okay, awesome. Let's see, I lost my spot minutes. Oh, here we go. John is a librarian and software engineer who loves solving problems. And the project that John is presenting today is the Wilford Woodruff Papers Foundation and how they are using From the Page to transcribe thousands of documents written by Wilford Woodruff. These documents include journals, autobiographies, letters, and other discourses. After the documents are transcribed on From the Page, they're published on a custom web platform where the scanned documents can be searched and viewed side by side with the transcript. And I will turn it over to John to tell you more about this.
Let's see. So, can you hear me okay? Okay, so I didn't realize I'd given such a long explanation on our project either. So I have a quick introduction that I wanted to share just about the Wilford Woodruff papers. Let's see. And just a quick introduction to Wilford Woodruff. He lived from 1807 to 1898 and was an American religious leader who served as the 4th president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. From 1889 until his death. So during his life, he wrote over 11,000 pages in journals and daybooks, and he wrote over 13,000 letters and received another 17,000 letters. And the foundation has gathered, I think the number is just over 6,000 of those letters, and they're trying to find more of them. And then, as Bethany said, it also includes discourses, autobiographies, and other records that he wrote. And we have quite a few of those. It's kind of an interesting story about a family member who found them in their basement, and they actually provided them to the church, and the church scanned them. But the foundation was organized in March of 2020, and we work with the church we worked with them to get the scans of all the documents. But the problem is transcribing them and making the text searchable and available to more people. So that's what the mission of the foundation is today. And they have about a 10-year projection of what or time frame of when they'd like to have all of these documents transcribed and ready. So that's where From the Page comes in. We are crowdsourcing the transcription. We have over 120 volunteers that work on transcribing documents. And so in order to get all of this content on a platform where it can be searched and browsed by people and even looked at by researchers, we developed a custom platform for displaying the images alongside the transcripts. And I'm just going to open this up so I can share some of the features. The custom platform is built on Laravel, is the backend, and it's written in PHP. We host it on Reclaim Hosting, but the front end is a combination of, we're using Tailwind CSS for the custom design here, but the viewer itself is a open Seadragon viewer that's been customized. So you can, zoom in, you can rotate things, you can download the original file. But one of the key features that we're using From the Page for is tagging people and places and dates that are mentioned in the documents. And so as we export the items from the page and import them into the website, we're parsing those tags that our transcribers are adding, and we've created things like biographies. So this letter is to Phoebe, who is Wilford's wife, and so when we click on the friend right there, it's actually tagged with her full name, and we can see a bio of who she is. And if we click on the view more, we actually can go into a page that has the bio, footnotes or references, and then all of the pages where she is mentioned. So whether it's in letters or journals or anything, we can go in and see each of those documents. And so you can see that in the transcription itself, and then we collect those and put them just below the transcription so people can easily see those tagged people and places as well. So I'm going to jump back over to my slideshow, and I talked about the technology that we're using. And I mentioned we do harvest the documents from the IIIF API. We have document sets that are published quarterly. So, there's a lot of planning that goes into what's going to be transcribed and getting help from the volunteers. And we push those out to the website. And once they're flagged as ready to go, we do a background process weekly, and we keep that going. So anything that's published on the website, we'll just run this background script to update the documents on our website so that if any changes are made, they're imported, and we see those updates regularly. You can also trigger those manually if we know there's an update that needs to be made. But I just wanted to talk a little bit about the structure that we've created on the site, and that is this is a letter. So for a letter, we'll have this container that contains all of the pages, and then we link the images to that. Pretty straightforward, but that goes into how we wrote the code. So this is the code that would be used to import the containers. So a letter or journal, we go through and grab all of the manifests from the API, update or create them, and then just log that we've done that. And then the next screen I wanted to show, this is what we've done to actually go through and create or update the page, grab the transcript, and then attach the image. So there's not a lot of code here to just go through and process all of those. And then you can see we have a method here that will actually convert all of those tags and convert them into a format that our website will understand so that it can link all of those up and go to the URLs on our website. So I think that's everything. Yeah.
Awesome.
Super impressive.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yeah, these are all.
Oh, thank you.
Yeah.
Do we have, John, is your code, is your scripts open source or not, John?
I think they are open source. That's one thing that we'd like to do in the future is now that we've got it up and running and working, we'd like to make it more available and maybe pull out some of the scripts so that they could be used outside of the website. But right now it's like deep within the Laravel website that you would find this script.
Understood.
Awesome. Mike, are you ready to present now?
Yes, I am. Sorry about that technical glitch. Yep, so I'm Mike Lisenbaum from the Holocaust Museum, and I'm going to talk with you guys about how we bring our material into from the page for transcription and translation, and then how we export it out. So let me attempt to share my screen now.
Yay, it worked.
Good. Okay, so yeah, so here's just a very quick high-level overview. So we have our own IIIF infrastructure here at the museum. We use that, the URLs for our IIIF manifests. We provide them to From the Page, which supports this interface. And that very seamlessly gets our project in place for volunteers to transcribe and in some cases translate. And then we built a custom utility that interfaces with From the Page's IIIF system to extract the transcription and translation data. That gets stored as that gets stored in our digital assets management system as metadata on the asset. And in turn, that is then exported as XML for entry into Solr. And it's also then reincorporated into our IIIF manifests for display on our collection search catalog. So I'm going to try to walk you through that visually as best I can in the short time I have. But so here's an example of a record on in our catalog that is IIIF enabled, and we'll get back to this a little later on. But basically, what I want to show here is just here's an example of a IIIF manifest, and so all we have to do is basically copy this URL, paste it into From the Page, and then volunteers can go to town on it. I'm just trying to see how I can minimize the, there we go. Okay, I just couldn't see my tabs because the Zoom was in the way. Okay, so yeah, so here's an example of IIIF manifest, and we can just copy this URL into From the Page, and that works very nicely. So once the material then is transcribed and translated, we use From the Page IIIF output to extract it. So here's the main page for all of the IIIF collections in From the Page. And I'm going to look for the collection we were looking at. So here we have it, the Dreyfus Diary. I'm going to click on that. That brings us to the collection for this diary, and that contains a series of manifests which correspond to what are called works within From the Page. So I'm going to scroll down to the one we were looking at. Here we go. So, okay. So you see here, this is the manifest for Diary D. And here's the From the Page manifest, and here's our manifest. And Nick pointed out nicely earlier about the challenges when you don't import from IIIF because you don't have a reference to map back to. So here you see we have our IIIF with our identifiers, and that's key to us being able to map back to our systems. So I'm going to click here and just kind of drill down a little bit as an example. So here is the manifest for that particular diary. And we're going to look for the sequences attribute, which contains canvases. And each canvas is essentially an image that's being acted upon and from the page, transcribed and or translated. So here's the first item, and here's the first canvas. And if we go down a little bit, you can see that there's something here, page status. So based on this, we know, okay, this particular canvas or image has a transcript and a translation. And there are other things that could be here too. For example, something else we're interested in is if the page is marked blank. This one obviously is not marked blank, but that's also data that we want to track. So now that we know that it has a transcript as well as a translation, we can act upon those things. So here you see all of the references to the various formats for transcriptions and translations. So we pull in plain text for search as well as HTML for display. So I'll just briefly click there and you see we have the HTML version, and then here we have plain text. And then what I'm going to show here is basically once all the code, so basically the code goes through every manifest in the collection. You can optionally exclude particular works if you're not ready. You can also optionally skip items that are not marked as being completely reviewed. But ultimately, once it's done, we have what I call here transcriptions organized by resource. Resource is essentially the asset ID in our digital assets management system. So now it's nicely organized by ID, and we have the plain text, the HTML, some other additional formats, and we can just go through this list, loop through, and just update our database and associate these transcriptions and translations with the asset in our system. And it's the same for the translations. We have a separate list for that. And then here is just a list of asset IDs for pages that were marked blank in the from the page system. So yeah, so then from there, we have it in our digital assets management system, and then it's exported into Solr as well as back into our IIIF manifest as metadata items there. And then we can search and view it in our catalog. So I know I'm probably running out of time, but I'll just do a quick search here for a keyword that I know will return that collection. Scroll down. And here we go. We have the Lucian Dreyfus papers. And here's a custom view we created. And basically, this is showing every page in this collection that has a match on transcribed and or translated data from the page. So we can go to D, which is what we're looking at. We can click on any of these pages, and that will now deep link us into the collection, bring us down to the viewer, and pop out the transcript here, as well as the translation. And then it's a standard IIIF viewer. You can zoom in and you can read along with the transcript. And I'll just show one more point here, in that now you can see, if we look at this, if we look at our manifest now, you can see in the metadata here, we have that stored as HTML. And if we were to go into the Solr instance, you could also see the plain text there. So just to drive that home, but I'll leave it there. Thanks, everybody.
Amazing.
Yeah.
It's so seamless. Okay, so we are going to move on to our final presenter, and that is Patrick Wallace from Middlebury College. Patrick is the digital, can you hear me? Am I frozen? Okay, I just heard some weird feedback. Anyway, Patrick is the digital project and archives librarian at Middlebury College. And he's a specialist in digital archives preservation and information organization with a radical streak, dedicated by vocation to the work of equipping people with resources and techniques necessary to engage with the information economy on their own terms. He is a passionate supporter of minimal computing, free and low-cost tools, recycled technology, and promiscuous digital collections. And with this particular project at Middlebury, Middlebury has been using From the Page to crowdsource transcription from a wide range of letters and manuscripts from the 19th and 20th centuries that's held in their collection on the Internet Archive. Using IIIF and some simple scripts, they've been able to enrich their item records with full text transcriptions from the page en masse at very little cost in terms of money, time, and labor. And I will let Patrick tell you more about that.
All right, sorry, I think the feedback's my fault. I'm not sure my gain levels are set correctly. Well, I will start by, I guess I can share my screen. There we go. So we at Middlebury, we can keep all of our digital archival content in Internet Archive. Internet Archive acts as our repository. The first thing I wanted to show was a tool that archive.org maintains. I put the link also in the notes for the Internet Archive Python library. We rely on this for all of our management, really. And the key thing that this does is it provides a Python library to interact with the Internet Archive API, and also has a command line tool that allows for bulk uploading objects and doing metadata changes via CSV files. So our integrations with From the Page are a combination of using IIIF manifests to import collections into From the Page, and then kind of working with files taken from the export side of From the Page to generate new CSV files that then get pushed to Internet Archive to do metadata changes. The basic process is creating collections. Ben had provided a Ruby script that generated Internet Archive manifests from Internet Archive collections. I kind of ported that and made some changes to put it into Python to let me create manifests from an arbitrary list of items. I don't have that up in GitHub because I'm not super confident in my Python ability, and don't want to break anybody's stuff, and two, I have just been lazy about GitHub lately. But it's pretty simple. So once the collection's created and From the Page, I watch it roughly quarterly or whenever there's a lot of new transcription coming in. I will export the work metadata sheet from the Page export interface, and export verbatim plain text files, the one per item option for the whole collection. So I end up with, from the work metadata sheet, I kind of limit that to the slug column and the original IIIF manifest column for those two URLs. I then have a script that matches the From the Page slug with an IA identifier, rename the text file to the IA identifier, create a CSV column that has two columns. One's the Internet Archive identifier, which is required for the API tool. And the other one is the transcription, the contents of each text file wrapped in a pre-format HTML tag. And then the tool pushes those to each item record, along with uploading the original text file as a new file within that object. And so from an untranscribed item looks like this, which is a letter from Emma Willard to Jonathan Allen, Emma Willard being a famous American educator. When things get created, the script that does the IIIF manifest also puts this little note in that says, help us out with transcription, visit from the page, gives the from the page link, and then a direct link to the item. And then, so that goes to the item. Then when we export it, it ends up, it also strips that out when we re-upload it. So the transcript comes out pre-formatted, which still breaks because this is a restricted column width for the display, but having the transcription in the metadata field is really just to facilitate full text searching. And full text searching via Internet Archive's metadata view. Working with Internet Archive as our repository gets a little bit hacky, but it works very well for the most part. It adds in a little note that says there is a full text transcript available by selecting the text download option, and that's there. This one still has the pre-format tags because it's from an earlier version of the script. Those get stripped out. Again, it creates two versions of the file. The pre-formatted one just gets put into the CSV file for the metadata, and the original text file doesn't have those pre-format tags in the new version. And that's essentially it. Let's see if I can share. I do have, if anyone's interested, I'm happy to share the code for, where's my stop sharing button not working? If I try, there we go. If anyone's interested in the code, I'm happy to share it. It looks like this. It's super simple. It uses the CSV library that's, I think, bundled with Python. If it's not, it's installable via pip easily. JSON, and then system calls just for the variables. Yeah, and that is our whole process. It's a little bit wonky and a little bit manual, but.
Wow. I've never seen anyone updating anything in Internet Archive.
Yeah, we always tell people you can't, but turns out you can.
Maybe you can force my screen to stop sharing. Zoom is not.
We don't see it anymore, so we're good.
Oh, good. Okay, then it's just me.
Awesome. Well, thanks to all of our presenters. We have plenty of time now for a Q&A.
Hey, Patrick, would you mute? Because I think we're getting feedback via.
Oh, yeah, got it. I was like, I hear that again. It looks like there are a few questions in the chat, maybe. I'm trying to scroll back up. But also, this is very casual, so feel free to unmute and ask a question. I see a question from Victoria that was for Nicholas back in the first project, wondering if there were any changes taken on board by Content DM. Did they made any changes, I guess, after you spoke with them or were working with them? So that's one question we have so far.
So Content DM has been doing a lot with IIIF for the past couple of years, and they recently redid their server from something to Cantaloupe. And so Cantaloupe now makes the PDFs available, but I didn't talk to them about any of this stuff. They know about the bugs. They apportion their developer time according to their own priorities.
There's a question too from Alexandra about for U.S. Holocaust Memorial Museum. If a user wanted to download the transcript or translation, would they have to go through the IIIF manifest, or is it available separately someplace, and in what formats?
That's a good question. No, we don't make it downloadable from our website currently, there hasn't been that demand. However, it's a very good idea, and I think From the Page would make that pretty easy for us because they have various formats available for download. And I don't know for sure if you need to be logged in or authenticated to get those, or if they're public, but I imagine we could just link to those various formats. I think I saw TEI and CSV and TXT. So I think that would definitely be something we could satisfy.
Yeah.
Good question.
We also, we did a lot of work in the last year that we haven't publicized very well with some other download formats, PDF and Microsoft Word.
Which might be a little more public friendly, but you should be able to link directly to those as well.
You
Though
maybe
we need to add those to the
yeah.
API. We need to add those to the API.
Yeah.
There's a long list of features to add that have come out of this this call.
Yeah, I actually was looking at your export page a couple of months ago, and I noticed, oh, you guys have done a lot of updates to this. So very nice.
Thank you, NEH. It was a UT Austin Library collaboration. So.
Lauren has a question for Sarah and Ben and asks, does From the Page keep track of users' different strategies for different platforms? And do you ever matchmake or see collaborations with users on the same systems?
We would love to matchmake when possible, but often we don't even know about these. So for example, I know UT Austin is very interested in integrating their From the Page installation with their Island Door installation. So it would be, I think, really neat to connect them to Leiden and you know, see if there's things that could be shared like that. Yeah, I would love to do. I'd love to do more of those. We're kind of hoping this conversation starts a lot of that communication.
Part of it, you don't know how people are using your API unless they tell you. Which
Yeah,
we talk to people, don't get us wrong.
But most of these presentations have been entirely new to us. So.
Yeah.
Olga has a question for Patrick. They say the Internet Archive and From the Page is a super elegant solution. Do you have a guideline or description of the entire workflow for other Internet Archive users or libraries to use?
I don't, but I could probably paste one in. I have my notes to keep my own brain in line. I also put I dropped a link to the IIIF manifest creator that in a version that I think works from GitHub. So that's in the notes now.
We might, if you're willing, Patrick, to let us kind of work on formalizing that as some documentation and running it by you. I think we'd be happy to, to help make it something that's more.
Again, we had no idea you could update Internet Archive material, so this is really exciting.
Excellent. The documents, the Internet Archive doc that I shared the link to in the notes is really thorough. So they actually have really good documentation for the tool, I think.
Great.
I have another question, unless there's another one in the chat before.
Go ahead.
But I think not. So thank you all for your wonderful talks. This is all super exciting, and I'm wondering, particularly, well, I guess for the transcriptions more so than some of the other sort of tagged data that gets done on From the Page. How did you choose your metadata field? Because I know that there are a lot of character limits, for example, on transcription or note fields. Notes fields often become the we don't know what to do with something, we'll just jam it somewhere. And so as importing transcriptions crashed into other things that were already in over full notes fields. Yeah, and just wondering if any of the tools that you're using had particularly elegant feeling solutions or descriptions of the fields you used.
Well, I can say that So we didn't have any problems, but that's partially because we're currently using an open source digital asset management system that we have a lot of control over. But we are transitioning to a more robust enterprise level system that will give us lots of benefits. But one of the downsides is that we have a little less control over it. So we did actually have to ask the vendor to make some customizations to the length thresholds on the fields that we want to pull in for these transcriptions and translations, and they were able to do that. But it was something we had to address.
Thanks, Michael. And follow up on that particular situation, are you still going to be able to pull in like the TEI and the HTML and the plain text, or did you have to make a decision about which one to use?
Yeah, so we set up different fields for, we're pulling in plain text and HTML. We set up different fields for both, and we're successfully able to pull in both. Another hiccup though is that we actually ended up the digital asset, the new system that we're using did some field validation, which was messing with the HTML. So we had the solution they suggested for us, and it does work, is to base 64 encode the input and then decode it when we extract it. So that's how we're doing the HTML.
So I remember you asked a question about Content DM before. So are you familiar with Content DM at all, or?
Not as a user, no.
Okay. Well, in Content DM, for per collection, you can specify a schema for a collection, and it's basically a string value pair. And I haven't actually encountered, I've encountered them when you upload a PDF, chopping off a text limit on the size of the full text field. You can designate a single full text field, the FTS field, that will then be indexed specially and displayed in a transcript in Content DM. But there isn't a field length thing. And the fact that it's a key value pair with repeated values separated by semicolons and a space means that you can have any terrible metadata schema you want. So the scripts I was doing where you would have to go in and field-based transcription from the page is an HTML document. You go in, you grab all the p-span values, and then CSV then maps those to the Content DM field nicknames, and then they just go into Content DM. Unless there's a controlled vocabulary turned on, in which case it silently fails. So I don't know if that answers your question exactly, but metadata, I mean, coming from library, the metadata doing well. So on one end of library spectrum, we have MARC, which is incredibly formatted and nested and all that, and competes with XML for how nested it gets. And on the other side, you have Dublin Core, which is here's 15 suggestions for one row in a spreadsheet. And so Content DM lets you do Dublin Core, do it kind of the Dublin Core way, but it doesn't you can map things onto Dublin Core, which then go to the OMIPMH backend and all that. But you can kind of, archivists don't, the archives profession isn't geared around providing item level data for things. It's like completely antithetical to all the training. And so people just kind of do it however they kind of occurs to them to do it. A lot of repositories make sure all their different collections have the same metadata schema, which has some definite advantages. At my institution, we started using Content DM like way back, like 20 years ago. And so there's a lot of stuff built in, and we focus a little bit more on collections. So the individual collections have more data in them. So you can say specific things about things in a collection that are specific to that collection. And that's an approach where if we can get that data back out, it's a much richer data set about the collection where things mean things more relevant to the information, as opposed to 12 fields that catalog everything in the universe, which means they don't really catalog everything in the universe. So I don't know if that's even remotely what you were asking, but
that is super what I was asking. Yeah, because I've looked at a lot of different crowdsourcing projects that try to kind of wrangle the data in ways that fit nicely with existing archival practice. But as you say, it fundamentally it is a sort of adjacent way of describing materials, like going down to the item level is essentially antithetical to the finding aid. And so I think crowdsourcing is, I almost want to say, like accidentally throwing up some interesting challenges in terms of description that I think a lot of us didn't anticipate, 10, 20 years ago. And it's fun to be tackling them. So that was what I was asking.
Really, and from the page, a transcript or a translation is page level metadata, not even item level metadata, which is even a lower level of hierarchy. But I put a link in the chat a while back, and we'll put it in the email that we send out. We just brought out of beta a metadata creation as a crowdsourced task. So the idea that you can take a document and page through it and fill out a form, like our field-based sort of stuff, about the entire item, instead of working at a page level. And we're very curious, like we did it because people like Erin at Ohio and was doing this already with her dance posters, and we had requests from other people. But yeah, I think it's going to throw some other more challenging things in especially getting it back into systems like Content VM. So fun.
Well, it looks like we have a little less than 1 minute left, so we're pretty much at time. But speaking for myself and probably Ben and Sarah too, thank you so much to all of our presenters for sharing. This has been extremely interesting and I think exciting to see things that we didn't even know were happening. So
thank you so much to our speakers. You guys did a great job. You're doing amazing work. And thank you to everyone who attended.
Yeah, and thanks Bethany for organizing and running all this.
Oh yeah, and I shared the link to our upcoming webinar that's on January 26th, that is on that metadata feature that Sarah just spoke about. So.
Right. And we'll be sending out a follow-up email with a recording and all the notes and whatever else.
And to you speakers, we'll be sending other emails with our own follow-up questions.
Thank you all.